Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer.
But who is he?
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer.
And who is he?
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer.
And what he do?
And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. Today we're reacting to the testimony of Alex Murdaugh. But before we get to that, guess what? This episode, like all of our episodes, is brought to you by eSign.com. eSign.com is an effective way to remotely do business. So, for example, if you've got somebody else in another location, you can't get together, you email them, document, you download the app, you got 3 free signatures a month, and you can do business quickly, easily, efficiently, and it can be any kind of document. I use it all the time for retainer agreements, especially when my client's out of state or they can't make it to the office, so I email them the retainer agreement, eSign.com, and it's as simple as that. It just makes business happen. So, today we are working on an analysis of Alex Murdaugh. I keep saying Alec. But Alex Murdaugh, now let's just kind of recap some things that have, see, we all know what we're talking about. Alex Murdaugh is charged with 2 murders, murder of his son and his wife, Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. Now, it's interesting to note, though, since 2015, there have been 5 deaths associated with this family. Mallory, who died in a boat accident where the boat was driven by Paul, and actually Paul was scheduled to go to trial shortly around this time when this happened. Then you've got Maggie and Paul, those 2 deaths. Then you've also got the death of the housekeeper, and then you've got the death of this young man who is supposedly in some kind of relationship with Buster. So, and he was found in very suspicious circumstances. So, it's really got a lot of intrigue into this whole family. You've got Alex Murdaugh, who is 4th generation for this law firm. They've got all kinds of financial problems, and he's got an estate. He's lying. He's a lying liar, right? So let's talk about some of the mechanics of the night in question. So we know that he lied. And by he, I mean Alex Murdaugh. He lied about being near the kennels. And why did he told the cops he was never there. He changes his story when the evidence comes in that the snap has his voice on it. Now, Buster testified that wasn't my dad's voice. But now Alex Murdaugh was testifying, yeah, that's my voice and I was there. So you lose credibility with the jury when you lie, period. Now, let's talk a little bit about having your client testify. It is a dicey situation. 2 things. 1, you really like to keep your client off the stand if you can at all avoid it. If you can avoid having your client testify, you don't want them because they're not professional witnesses. And even if you're a lawyer, you're not a professional witness. You don't know what tricks are up the prosecutor's sleeve. Number 2, if you are going to testify, you want the testimony that they give to be the first time anybody hears anything out of their mouth, as opposed to all the statements that Alex Murdaugh made to the cops prior to, getting arrested. So, when you have a he said, she said case, like let's say it's a crim sex case or an assault case of some kind, sometimes you have to have your client testify because if you don't have your client testify, they only hear one narrative. And if they only hear one narrative, you're going to lose. But when you have a case like this, where there is no forensic evidence really tying Alex Murdaugh to the it's all circumstantial. We'll talk about that in a second too. Is it a smart idea to have him testify when the whole testimony, the whole cross-examination is going to be one long character assassination? He's got so much baggage. He's got theft of his law firm's money, theft from a buddy, theft of client funds, theft of a wrongful death settlement from his housekeeper. I mean, it just goes on. And then he lies. So here's just a few lies. He lied about being at the kennel, and he lied to the detectives about that. He lied about when the last time he saw, said the last time he saw them was at dinner, which wasn't true because he was at the kennels. He lied again about not being at the kennels. He blames the lies on his addiction and because of my addiction, you look at all this circumstances, I get paranoid. And think about it this way. You can ruin a marriage on one lie. And there's a doctrine in law called falsus in uno, falso in omnibus. You can have, and which essentially means if you're lying about one thing, you're lying about everything. And it stands for the proposition that if you don't believe him on one thing, that you can disregard his entire testimony. That is a doctrine that I argue all the time, especially if I can prove that the other person, the witness was lying. In this instance, it is a totally circumstantial case. What does that mean? That means you have to look at the big picture because there's no video, there's no forensics, and you have to try to put the puzzles together and infer from the evidence that is there. So one of the things that the prosecutor will argue is that these lies demonstrate a consciousness of guilt. A consciousness of guilt is a powerful tool for the prosecution. Now, I know a lot of people are on the fence, but one of the things that the prosecution is going to argue is that use your common sense, people. There is no other alternative. There's no evidence of anybody else being on that property. And there's evidence that Paul is there. He puts himself there right around the times of the murder. So it's right around 8:50 p.m., right? And around that time is the last time that Maggie's phone and Paul's phone are locked and no more activity on their phone. Now, there's some other information about, Maggie's phone being outside the gate of the compound. And let me just tell you the difference between cross-examination and direct. Direct examination is where the proponent of the witness or whoever is calling the witness asks certain questions, okay? And they ask him in a way that has to be open-ended. Cross-examination infers the answer is in the question. In other words, it was cold out yesterday, wasn't it? And, as opposed to what did it feel like yesterday? So that's kind of the difference between cross and very simplistic, of course, but cross and so the prosecution can cross-examine him and it's like, isn't it true that you lied? And when you lied about a material fact, and you lied to deputies. And you lied to deputies about your son and wife's murder. And in fact, you lied about where you were that day. And when you lied about where you were, you knew full well that you were right there at the scene, and you lied about being at the scene of the crime. Isn't that true? That's kind of the tenor of what a prosecution does.
Many times in the past.
Mr. Murdaugh, are you a family annihilator?
Now, that should be objected to as argumentative. So, and that's the other thing. When you ask questions, you can't just ask whatever you want. I mean, you can't just be abusive to the witness.
Annihilator? You mean like, did I shoot my wife and my son?
Yes.
No. Would never hurt Maggie Murdaugh. I would never hurt Paul Murdaugh under any circumstances.
Say that.
So, you watch him walk, in the well of the courtroom, and typically, that's not how it's done. In federal court, there's a podium that's right in the middle, and you have to have either a hand on it or you have to be right behind the podium. You can't walk around like this.
Excuse me?
You say that, but you lied to Maggie, didn't you?
I did lie to Maggie
You lied to Paul.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You lied to your father.
So when somebody's on the stand, one of the first thing you do, one of your main missions is, if they're, you're an opposing witness, is to destroy their credibility. And that's what the prosecution, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar. And he does this over and over again.
I'm sure I did at some point.
Did you tell him all the stuff you'd been up to over the years before he died?
No, I didn't tell him.
Did you lie to your brothers?
About financial things?
Yes.
This is actually one of the ways you get on snitches. You talked about all the different people. This is a classic cross-examination of a snitch, in a sense, because you got to destroy their credibility. And how you do that? By painting them as the liar that they are.
I would have lied to Randy at some point, I'm sure.
Did you lie to him about the last time you saw your wife and son alive?
I did.
Did you lie to their wives?
I'm sure I did.
Did you lie to Marion Proctor?
Yes.
And as you're sitting there as a defense lawyer, this shit sucks because it's like a boxer who can't punch back.
Bart Proctor?
Yes.
Did you lie to the Brandstetters?
Yes.
Did you lie to your best friend, Chris Wilson?
Probably.
Did you lie to your other friend, Barrett Bulware, when you took his money?
No, sir.
No.
I didn't lie like I told you. I didn't lie directly to him. I lied to him by omission, like we talked about. I mean, I didn't talk to him. I didn't see him at that time.
Did you lie to your law partners?
I did.
Did you lie to him about the kennels?
Some of them.
Did you lie to Mark Ball?
Yeah, I believe, based on what Mark said, I believe I did.
Did you lie to Ronnie Crosby?
According to what he said, I believe I did.
Did you lie to Johnny Parker?
I don't believe I ever discussed that with Johnny.
Did you lie to him about the finances when you borrowed that money in July of 2021?
I don't know if I lied to him about. I don't think Johnny asked me. I don't think I had to lie to Johnny about that, so I don't know.
Did you lie? Well, you certainly didn't disclose to him the truth when you borrowed that $250,000, did you?
I did not tell him what I was going to use it for.
I mean, didn't we say before that not telling the whole truth is the same as telling a lie?
Sure it is.
You don't think that's a lie, though?
I'm just saying, Mr. Waters, I'm not taking issue with that, but I don't even know that Johnny and I mean, Johnny had loaned me money numerous times. It wasn't any long sit-down discussion where Johnny wanted to know exactly what I was doing with it. That conversation would have been, I needed it. Johnny was always willing to help me, and that would have been the conversation. So on that specific event, did I lie to him? I don't know.
Yeah, he ended up being out $477,000, didn't he?
He ended up being out a lot of money.
When you have somebody not only that are lying to people, but also financially abusing all those around him, including his own law partners, his brothers, and his clients, and everybody around him. The guy is swimming in debt and swimming in losing his lifestyle. And I'm not really buying the whole opiate addiction that is $50,000 a month. I mean, that'd be $600,000 a year. I'm not. I mean, certainly that may be part of it, but in 2019 alone, he stole $3.7 million from his law partners. So that doesn't account for just the addiction part of it.
And thank you for your qualifications as to that. Did you lie to Lee Cope?
I don't know. I don't know if Lee Cope was around when I said that or not.
Did you lie to Danny Henderson?
I did lie to Danny.
Did you lie to Jeannie Seckinger?
About finances, yes, I did.
You didn't ever talk to her about the kennels?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Did you lie to Annette Griswold?
I did.
Did you lie to Christy Gerald?
So we're in the 5th week of trial, right? And so there's been over 70 witnesses. So this is a big trial. And it's grueling, especially when you have this many people testifying. And so now you have Alex on the stand, and he's going to keep this all together. But he's had the benefit of a 5-week trial. He knows what the evidence is. And he's already given a prior statement. So he's going to shift and dodge and duck and weave.
Your other secretary, the paralegal.
I don't believe she and I discussed. I would have at some point, I'm sure.
Did you lie to Michael Gunn?
I'm sure I did at some point, but I mean, Michael wasn't involved in any of this, so I don't know that any of this ever came up with Michael.
Did you lie to your clients? Did you lie to Pamela Pinckney?
I did.
Natasha Thomas?
I don't know that I dealt with Natasha, but I certainly lied about that. Again, I don't know that I talked to Hakeem, but I certainly lied about that.
You know why people lie, Mr. Murdaugh? Because they know they've done something wrong.
For the most time, I do.
You've been able to lie quickly and easily and convincingly if you think it'll save your skin for well over a decade. Isn't that true?
That's pretty powerful. You know why people lie? Of course you do. And you've been doing this for 10 years to save your hind end, you know?
I have lied well over a decade.
And you want this jury to believe a story manufactured to fit the evidence that you brought forth just yesterday, after hearing this trial's worth of testimony.
No, sir, that's not correct.
Mr. Murdaugh, we went through this for a while, but you remember at the beginning of your testimony, I asked you whether or not you agreed that trying to explain your presence on the kennel video was the most important part of your testimony before this jury. Remember?
One of the things that they also try to do is, and it's with any witness, try to get them to agree to as much of your theory of the case as possible. So things that, you know, you can't argue with, things that you cannot dispute. And then when he changes his story, watch what happens.
And you said, oh, not the most important. I said, was it at least important? You recall that from yesterday.
Yeah, I recall you asking those questions, yes, sir.
And you agree it's important, don't you?
I agree that is an important component. But I think there's a lot of important components.
And you testified yesterday, and during cross yesterday and cross today. It's kind of evolved on the fact of the factors that led you to decide to lie at some point during that interview with David Owen, correct?
I disagree with that. I don't think those factors have evolved. I mean, you've asked some more specific questions, but those factors are still the same factors. You may have asked questions and gained a little more detail, but those factors haven't changed.
But it was the dope paranoia. It was the fact that the deputy took your GSR. It was the fact that your law partners and Greg Alexander and the sheriff were telling you you needed to have a lawyer before you talked to police. It was the factor that you got in the car with Dave Owen and thought.
GSR, by the way, is gunshot residue. It's a test they use to determine whether or not you've fired a weapon.
Somebody else from some case 10 years ago, correct?
That believing David Owens was the person involved in the case that I talked about was one of the factors that caused me to distrust SLED.
All right. And then also you said that they started
And SLED, just so you know, is South Carolina Law Enforcement Division.
asking you about, in that first interview, about your relationship with Maggie and Paula. And that's one thing you mentioned as well,
And
correct?
that was certainly something that contributed to me having paranoid thinking.
And when you watch his body language, you know, he's a sniveling, you know, And I don't want to say sniveling. He's crying, he's weak, and it's hard to determine what's genuine and what isn't, especially with somebody who's used to lying. But the one thing that I keep coming back to is I don't really get the motive here. He's got all this shit coming down on him like a ton of bricks, and he wants to get sympathy for his death of his wife and his son, so he's gonna kill them to get sympathy. I'm just not. I mean, to kill your own kid to distract from the problems that you have, I'm having a little hard time with that motive. My understanding is that Maggie may have hired a forensic accountant to look into their finances, but still, to go to the length of murdering your wife and son, when, if he did it, certainly wasn't well thought out.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
Okay. The police are here now. The police are here now.
But just like I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the motive, I'm also having trouble wrapping my head around the fact that there's no evidence of any other intruder, no evidence of that, footprints, no tire tracks, no evidence that anybody else was on that property, and he's the last one. And it's undisputed that he's the last one to see them alive. Sometimes the lack of an alternative can lead you to the conclusion, that is like the only conclusion. He's the last one there. He had to have done it because there's nobody else that could have done it.
When was the last time you were here with them? Or talked to them or anything like that?
When was the last time you were here with them or talked to them or anything like that? Listen to what he says. Now keep in mind, if he did it, it happened probably an hour and a half ago, and he's had this time to kind of build up, figure out what the hell he's going to say.
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
So, and we know that's not true because he's on that video. You can hear him on the kennel snap video that Paul took, and that is right around 8:50.
That was Sergeant Green, correct?
Yeah, that was Sergeant Green.
And at that point in time, sled was not there. No one had gotten GSR from you. Your law partners or Sheriff Hill were not there.
That's correct.
No one had asked you about your relationships. David Owen was not there.
That's correct.
But you still told the same lie. And all those reasons that you just gave this jury about the most important part of your testimony was a lie too.
So this is a common trial technique, where a prosecutor starts out calm, and then build. Now I'm pissed off because you lied to this jury, and that's exactly what he's doing. But he does make a good point. All the things that you said were the reasons for lying didn't exist at that particular moment.
Isn't that true, Mr. Murdaugh?
I disagree with that.
Nothing further.
Here's how this works. So his own lawyers put him on the stand first, right? And then question them. And then the prosecutor asks questions. And then if you can go back and clean things up a little bit by allowing him to explain certain things with what they call redirect. But your redirect has to be limited to what the cross-examination was, okay? And then if there's recross, the recross has to be limited to what the direct examination. So it just narrows the issues down over and over again.
States 569, and you recognize the person on the right in that image?
No, sir.
You don't recognize that?
I don't recognize him.
No, I'm asking about that.
Me?
Is that you?
Yeah, it looks like me.
All right. What's hanging out of your pocket? Plain view.
Looks like a badge.
You didn't recall that until I just showed you that picture?
No, sir, I did not.
Brought it off the States 569 in the evidence. That's you in the white shirt, is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
This is the badge hanging out of your pocket? Remember which, is that correct?
Looks to be, yes, sir.
Which badge is that? Which one of the two? Remember?
Nah, you can't tell from here.
Okay. Why'd you have it hanging out of your pocket like that?
I don't remember having that. I don't know.
You don't remember that?
I don't remember that, no, sir.
Did you generally walk around with your badge hanging out of your pocket?
Generally speaking, no, sir, I did not.
Or only when you wanted some advantage from it?
Did I?
Did you want some?
My understanding is that they had a prosecution contract, and that's where the badge comes from.
Advantage from wearing it like that?
Did I hang it out in my pocket when I wanted an advantage?
Yes.
I may have. I certainly may have.
What advantage did you want
When?
then?
I don't even recall this, Mr. Waters, but if I was wanting some advantage, as you say it, I guess I was begging for a meeting with y'all to try to bring this to a close, to talk to y'all about everything up until the time that y'all charged me with hurting Maggie and Paul. Now,
So what he's talking about there is this boat accident where Paul was driving drunk and killed one of his buddy's girlfriends. It's Mallory Beach.
I stopped, obviously.
Claiming that you were begging for a meeting and but you admit information was never conveyed that you wanted to change your story after multiple interviews with law enforcement about what happened that night, including the most important fact of all, which is when the last time you supposedly saw your wife and son alive was.
That is probably the most salient and important fact in this case. When did you last see, who was the last person to see them alive? That would have been Alex Murdaugh. And he lied about that particular fact. That is super damaging.
I don't know exactly what was conveyed or not because I wasn't part of it. All I know
Fair
is
enough.
what
You don't
I
know.
was trying to do was to sit down. I understood to bring all this to a close that y'all would want me to sit down and go through all of these financial things, all of these things that I'd done wrong.
Here's the thing. Even if he's acquitted of this, I mean, he's guilty of stealing about $9 million over the course of several years. And he's admitted to every element of those offenses. So regardless if he goes to prison on this or not, he's definitely going to prison on the financial crimes.
And to try to bring that to a close, I was repeatedly trying to sit down with y'all.
The reality is, Mr. Murdaugh, is the reason why no one's ever heard that before is because you had to sit in this courtroom and hear your family and your friends, one after the other, come in and testify that you were on that kennel video. So you, like you've done so many times over the course of your life, had to back up and make a new story that kind of fit with the facts that can't be denied. Isn't that true, sir?
No, sir, that's not true.
And so the answer to that question really doesn't even matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is because the implication is out there. So the jury hears what, the argument basically that's being made by the prosecution.
You've done that over and over again over the years with all of this that we've been talking about, haven't you?
I've done what over and over again?
The second that you're confronted with facts that you can't deny, you immediately come up with a new lie. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Waters, have we established I have lied many times, but I can't sit here and tell you that, what are you talking about, facts that I can't deny? That I would disagree with that proposition that you're putting out, that was what I did all the time. But in doing that, I admit again that I've lied to people that trusted me.
So we can agree that the prosecution and law enforcement and so many of your friends and family heard for the first time your story about the kennels yesterday after all these weeks of testimony. Can we agree on that?
That law enforcement, my partners, and my friends heard me say that for the first time. Yes, I agree with that.
And that's powerful. So he's getting him to agree that you're lying and lying and lying, but he's not getting him to agree to the ultimate facts because he disputes the facts. But the fact that he is lying and has been able to sit through this whole trial and now comes up with different stories in order to save his ass, the jury can use that for any purpose. When somebody lies, there's a limited, you can use it to judge their credibility. Well, they can use it to determine whether he's guilty or not. If they believe that he's lying to save his ass, the jury can use that to determine whether or not he's guilty. Is this consciousness of guilt? So what we've seen here is we've seen just an absolute character assassination. And it matters and it doesn't matter. It matters in the sense that, you can't trust a word this guy says. I mean, would you, and one of the instructions to the jury is what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is. And it's the proof that one would use in their most important of affairs. And so when you talk about, and as a prosecutor, the prosecutor can use that and say, would you rely on Alex Murdaugh's word in your most important affairs? I would tell you that his word is worth zero. And there are some unassailable facts in this case. He lied. He lied about being the last person to basically see them alive. And he lied about his whereabouts, where he was on the property. And it's not until he testifies that this comes out. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what a South Carolina jury is going to really want in terms of proof. Very rarely do you have a situation where you have the homicide happening on video. I've had that happen on multiple occasions. But this is at a large property, and it'll be really interesting to see because you're going to get a verdict next week. But I'm left with two questions. One, wish there was more forensic evidence, right? Something more to tie him to this. And then the other question, if it wasn't him, then who? And there's no evidence of the other who. He makes this bald assertion that his son was in this boat accident and he's been threatened over and over again. And then he even made the comment that he reported it, but there's no report, and he backtracked on that. So even that part of the story is not solid for him. So every part of his testimony, I think, is suspect. And when you have such a flawed individual, the idea that his lawyers wanted him to testify is probably ridiculous, because his lawyers wouldn't. Because if he doesn't testify, a lot of this shit doesn't come in. It's certainly not to the length that it's come in through him. So and all these lies and everything it really displays a very, very poor character. So this has just been our reaction to Alex Murdaugh's testimony. There's a lot more testimony we could have reacted to, but there's just so much of it. We'll probably maybe do another reaction next week when we get the verdict, and if there's any other breaking developments, we'll bring it to you. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for subscribing. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. sign up for Patreon, and we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, please just let my God.